Anyway, my name is Dermot Cole, and I'm going to be the moderator. This is these are candidates for U.S. House of Representatives. Congressman Young's not here tonight. I was going to make a Clint Eastwood joke, Chair, but it's gone now. But there will be future debate opportunities, I believe, with Congressman Young and the other candidates. I'd like to let you know that AARP, as you probably know, is the sponsor of tonight's event. AARP does not support or oppose candidates for public office, nor contribute money to political parties or political candidates' campaigns. We'll start with a few questions for our candidates and open up to the audience. This time I'd like to introduce Sharon Sisna and Jim Mcdermott.
Excuse me, this is a test period. My name is Sharon Sisna, and I came to Alaska in 1967 as a traveler. And on my way home, I realized that I already was home, and so I stayed. I had been working my way through school in Seattle, and in making that decision, I was beginning to make the decision that I was going to switch schools from University of Washington to the University of Alaska, and that school was in Anchorage. And after getting through school, I started, first of all, working with high-risk children in institutions as I had in Seattle. But after becoming a mom, I started a business in publications that lasted for 27 years. And it was a wonderful business that took me all over the state, and it really helped me understand just exactly what a wondrous place we have here and how very remote parts of it are, how very different all of it is from each other. And after my daughter graduated from high school, I went back and got a master's degree in counseling psych. And in working with children again, I began to see that the legislature was pulling money away from care of children and general ways that it was not really doing a service to the people of Alaska in terms of the mental health and the physical health. So I ran for office. Now it's 14 years later, and I've been serving for the past 14 years, and probably the thing that I've done consistently throughout is getting people together, talking about issues. Started with health issues, but really the fact is that when you start looking at health, you're looking at everything. You can't separate any one of these issues from all of the other. How we're doing economically, how we're doing in energy, all of the different ways really come together, and we have to work them all out. So that's why I'm here, is that what I've seen through my own experiences is constitutional issues and the fact that we're not paying attention to the people of Alaska in the way we need to. It's such a diverse state, we have to pay attention and really understand across the state what's happening.
I should know better than to turn this off. Anyway, thank you, Representative Sisna. Now, Mr. Mcdermott, you have, please give your opening statement.
Thank you. Thank you, AARP, for the invite tonight. It's interesting, being Jim Mcdermott with the Libertarian Party, I was asking some of my students and some of my supporters, you know, as a professor, I'm new to this political arena. I said, what should I do tonight? How should I open up? They said, Jim, we're going to give you 2 pieces of advice. First, tell them a little bit about your background. Second, do not let them see that sometimes you're full of yourself. So I'm going to do my best to keep that secret from you tonight. I've been married to Janet. She's in the audience tonight for 16 years. We brought together a blended family of 7 children, and we now have 16 grandchildren. The United States Air Force is what brought me here to Alaska. I spent 22 years in the United States Air Force. And like my colleague here, I fell in love with Alaska. More than anything, I fell in love with the culture of Alaska. The people who strive for independence. After I left the Air Force, I spent some time working in the civilian market, and again, like my colleague here, I went on to graduate school and got my master's in organizational management. But my kids said, Jim, no, Dad, my stepkids call me Jim, you need to get a little bit more background in technology. So I surprised them and did just that. I added information technology to my master's degree, just to give me that extra edge with technology, and it's shown to be quite an advantage as I moved along. I worked with DeVry University, University of Alaska Anchorage, in enrollment services, moved on to work with a great organization you may have heard of them called the University of Alaska Fairbanks. I'm now a term professor with them. I was also the director of a small business development center here in Fairbanks. Had a great opportunity to then be a volunteer with SCORE, and for the small business group out there, you know what that stands for, Service Corps for Retired Executives, and I volunteer my time to counsel small business. I'm a civilian. I'm a citizen running for office. I tell my students in the classroom, I have for years, I said, you know what Washington, D.C. needs? It needs more Alaskans, less Ivy League covered graduates, and more Alaskan graduates. Because Alaskans just seem to be oozing that independent spirit, that common sense mindset. And I get them all fired up, and they said, and Jim, why aren't you running? So here I am tonight, running for office. I see the mayor of North Pole out there, and he got to meet a lot of my students today. My focus is on personal liberty. Of course, that's the focus of the Libertarian Party. The people first. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. We're going to start with a couple of broad questions about important federal policies. First question, and this is to Representative Sisna first, and then Mr. McDermott. How would you protect Social Security for today's seniors and strengthen it for future generations? You have 2 minutes to respond, please.
I believe that one of the most important things that we can do in Washington, D.C. is to actually make positive that the two bodies work not only with each other, but within each of the bodies. Right now, there appears to be such a problem, deadlock, on so many different issues, and that politics itself is moved in a way that really does hinder being able to talk about issues, be able to look at the different facts, be able to collect all of the information that's absolutely essential in order to be able to make decisions. And when you get to the place where you're not, as a group, really understanding things because you're so busy fighting with each other, then I don't think that we get much done at all. I've seen in the dealings with Washington, D.C., oftentimes they just don't get the fact that Alaska is so astoundingly diverse, community by community. And if they don't understand our state, then I think that it's across the country. And all of the different states need to work with each other in a much more collaborative way. So my job in Washington, D.C. would be getting people together and putting the facts in front of people and getting them to actually talk about how their state differs and how it is the same, and come up with some really basic understanding about what we need to do.
Thank you. Mr. McDermott, the opening question to you. How would you protect Social Security for today's seniors and strengthen it for future generations?
Great question. When I'm talking to a lot of the good people here in Alaska, I get a wide scope of responses back on this particular question. Some people say it should be free market only, Social Security should go away. Some say that Social Security should be cradle to grave. Maybe there's some compromise. I believe when we look at the Social Security system and we get to Washington, D.C., there should be a dialogue. Anybody Heard of University of Alaska Fairbanks out there? You heard of it, right? At the University of Alaska Fairbanks, I have the option as an instructor to either pay into the Social Security program or to opt out and go into a private retirement program. I find that myself and many of my colleagues choose to go the private route. What if we allowed Americans of all places in the world, all Americans, choice on the direction they want to go? That's the end of my comment.
All right, thank you. Our next question, we'll start with Mr. McDermott first. As healthcare costs rise and Medicare costs increase, what's the best way to improve funding for Medicare?
Well, what I'm reading in the papers and reading what Washington, D.C. is putting out, the best way to pay for it is to increase our taxes. I'm just not a big fan of that. I understand that it's going to be running out of money. The Medicare funds and the Social Security funds are also in trouble. But that is what's on the table right now. What do you think out there? Do we have other choices? I think a robust economy to start with would be a great way. If we had a robust economy and more revenues coming into the coffers, we probably wouldn't even be having this discussion tonight. So I'm very pro-free market. As I tell my students, I have to put that bias right out in front of them that I'm extremely biased towards free markets, and I think that would be a way to really help all of our programs that we're currently funding. But again, would it be okay to have a discussion about choice? To give people choices whether they want to set up independent tax-free programs where they can pay into, or continue down the same road that we're kicking the can down. I'm part of the baby boomer group. I've been paying into Social Security for a lot of years. Any excess that was going to Social Security was being what? Siphoned off, used by the people in D.C. to take care of other needs. Maybe we just got to hold their feet to the fire if we are going to continue down this road, where if there is any excess fund, these excess funds are used to reinvest back into that same fund. Just a thought. Thank you.
Representative Cisna.
I think I have the question. Healthcare costs and Medicare. And basically, we're talking money. And I've been in a body of people who have been working on money now for 14 years and watched astounding amounts of money going through the state and out the other side. It is a really frightening thing to see money spent without having real good understanding of the quality of product you get at the end. And I think with healthcare, that's what I've seen. I've worked a lot on the issue of the uninsured, and the uninsured are taken care of with Medicare. And because we haven't taken care of people before they get to retirement age, we pay a huge amount more for people to be healthy once they get there. That's not the time to do it. So basically, what I think is absolutely essential is, in fact, what Washington, D.C. started doing in the last few years. And that is come up with a management plan for the money. It's money we're talking about. It's not the care. It's the management of the money. And that, to me, is the really important thing. And when you're talking about public administration and management, there are ways to do this. And I did work on about half a master's degree in public administration. So I've seen the models, and they can be done. We need to manage our money, and it needs to be federal.
Thank you. If there's any questions from the audience, maybe you can bring them up. In the meantime, I'll make up a question from the audience. No, this is a question. Some people are talking about having seniors buy insurance from a choice of private insurance plans with a fixed contribution from the government to pay their premiums. Do you support this approach instead of traditional Medicare? And if you support this, could this plan increase the out-of-pocket costs for seniors? Representative Cisna?
I knew you were going to ask me first. Would you please repeat that? I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Because I was still working on the last one.
All right, well, I have a tendency to mumble sometimes. Okay, let me simplify the question a bit. Some people are talking about changing Medicare so that senior citizens would buy insurance from a choice of private insurance plans with a fixed contribution from the government that would pay premiums. Do you support this approach instead of traditional Medicare? And if you do support this approach, would this increase the cost for seniors?
I can't really answer that without knowing a great deal more about it. And one of the things that I felt very strongly about in the last number of years where we've been watching Washington, D.C., Congress working on this whole health issue was that Alaska is so different in so many ways than so many other parts of the country. And that legislation is like so much of the legislation I've seen in the legislature in Alaska. And that is that in order to fix things, it takes a long time. Something as troubling as our healthcare costs are not something that you just put through in a few years and you've gotten there, and not with 50 states. It's really imperative that we look at what we've got right now, then figure out what the solutions can be. This is one good idea, but there are other good ideas as well. And keep working at fixes so that we come up with something that's perfect for everybody, which means nobody's going to like it completely.
Amen.
Okay, Mr. McDermott.
And sorry for that amen, I couldn't help myself. It's kind of like, again, with my experience in the university setting, one university fits all. Obviously, that's just not the right answer. The right answer is, I'm going to go back to my earlier statement, the right answer is choice. This is one choice that we should have a dialogue on. No, you're absolutely right, we should be chatting about this. But for those of us who are very, very free market oriented, yeah, we'd like to see the option where I have the choice of taking care of my own retirement fund or setting up my own Medicare fund. I asked a group of students not too long ago, I said, hey, if you had a choice of the present Medicare system, business students by the way, if you had a choice between the present Medicare system or the pay-in starting now, right now, at your age, most of them 19 to 25, and start to set up your own medical retirement in a tax-free option, I just got to sit back. I said, I don't want you to think I'm trying to push into this. They understand Mr. McDermott is free market oriented. But not a single hand went up for the current system. Every student would prefer, if they had the choice, to go into a system where they were able to pay in tax-free and start setting up their own medical planning for their own future. I thought it was really interesting. I thought it was a great short survey. Yes, it's a young group. Yes, the demographics are skewed. But at the same time, I think if we started talking with Americans with this dual track type of system, where we allow people who have already been promised what's in place will be there, but then start giving choice for those who are coming down the road, the young professionals that are out there today that may have a different thought process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have some questions now from the audience, and you can tell from some of these questions that the people asking the question have a point of view. Here we go. What is your stand on Obamacare, and what would you do to correct its shortfalls? Would you be willing to give up a congressional plan for your coverage under Obamacare? I think what they're saying is, would you be willing to not take the congressional medical coverage under Obamacare? Mr. McDermott, we could start with you, please.
Okay, I don't think I even need to give a response, but I'll tell you, yes, I would give up the Obamacare to keep the congressional package because it's much stronger, much better.
No, I think the question was, would you give
I
up
just
the
reversed
congressional?
it. Okay, yeah. So, yes, obviously there's a reason why Congress doesn't want to swap over to the plan that they're talking is going to be a one sweater size that fits all. Thank you.
Representative Cisna.
I personally would move forward on the plan we have because one legislature can't bind another. And that means that what's there right now is a sitting duck, and that's always true. So move forward, and move forward means, I personally think, give states more say in what's happening and have the states start developing their own proposals. And in Alaska, my own feeling is, just having talked to so many people about the issue of the uninsured and different ways people thought they'd work on it, I think that this state would go for a more private and more bringing the private sector in much more than Obamacare does do. But at the same time, one of the things that study has shown in Alaska on the uninsured, and it just does describe our state, we have an enormous population of people who are only seasonally employed, which means that they only have insurance part of the year. So it really puts people in a really dangerous, difficult place. So we have people who are working hard. They're hard workers. They're living the kind of life that is a life that is really very individual. And yet, if they get sick, what happens? We all pay. So we need to have some fixes that cover the health of everyone for our total workforce.
Okay, moving along here, moving to a very simple question. What are we going to do with our national debt? Representative Sisna, can you talk about
Man. Well, I think the really most important thing that we can do is the federal government led the way, led the individual states in coming up with what they called results-based funding, and really looking always at what were the outcomes of the money that the federal government spent. Did they do a good job with it? And then making positive that people came through and cleaned it up or get rid of the program. Now, that has kind of been dropped as far as I can see. And I know in the state of Alaska it never took hold. There were conversations about it, but it's never happened. And I think across the country we've got to start making positive that when public money is spent, it's spent very well. That's the first thing I do, is make sure that we're spending our money really wisely and figure out how to cut government based on the results that the people who are spending money, are they doing what actually is helping the public or not?
All right. Mr. McDermott, could you tackle that, please?
Well, as the School of Management business professor, I anticipated this question coming our way tonight, so guess who I bounced it off again? I asked my business students. They probably are already getting tired of me. And I said, hey, what do you think about this? Here you are in my class, to be able to pass my class, and you're going to turn in an 80 or 100-page business plan. You need to show me a balanced budget. You need to show me a positive cash flow, or you're showing me disaster. Now, they get on the Titanic of budgets, I tell them then they know where they'll find their grave, at the bottom of the Titanic. I also explain to them that if we, small businesses in particular, can have a balanced budget and understand the need for positive cash flow, then why can't our leaders in Washington, D.C. have that same mindset? This just seems like madness. This is why we need more Alaskans in Washington, D.C. Maybe we need to bring that common sense. My students have another perfect answer for you. Washington, D.C., if you happen to be eavesdropping tonight, they said you don't get paid until you turned in a balanced budget. My students said also tell you you're not going to get 5 weeks of summer leave and then come back to work for a week and take 6 weeks to run for office. Not going to happen on their dime. That's not me, Don, if you're out there. That's the students. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much. And we have quite a few questions from the audience, so let's try, Susan, can we try maybe like 30-second answers? How do you feel about lobbyists? Representative Sisna, could you tackle that?
I think lobbyists normally are really nice people. And I've met quite a few. When I started my legislative experience 14 years ago, 6 days before my late husband had died. And so I came in as a grieving widow, and I didn't want to talk to one lobbyist, and I wasn't nice about it, and they still don't come back.
Okay, Mr. McDermott.
Well, I don't know, for some reason duct tape just ran in my mind, but when I think about lobbyists, I really do believe they have way too much influence on the decision-making of our leaders. And I'd like to see, as much as possible, I don't think we can roust them out completely, but as much as possible to make it uncomfortable for them to have that kind of access. The people need to have a better access than the lobbyists. Thank you.
This is also a quick question here. Would you support attacking Iran?
Is that for me?
Well, Representative Sisna first, please.
Not without a great deal of thought first, and I don't think that happened.
Mr. McDermott, please.
22 years in the United States Air Force. I can tell you right now, my brothers and sisters, were not in a hurry to go to war with everyone on the planet. Our job was to defend this great country. Because we don't like their government, not enough reason for me, no.
Okay. A civilian pay freeze has been in effect for 2 years. Will you support a pay freeze for the military? Mr. McDermott.
Oh, gosh, you got me in a tough spot, because now you know I have my heartstrings with the military. We have the best paid, best equipped military on the planet, at least when I was in the military. We need to make sure that we keep our best and our brightest, so we need to pay them well. If it's been 2 years since they've had a raise and they've been putting their lives in danger for us, yeah, let's give them a small raise. What the heck?
Well, I think in that question, the civilian pay freeze has been in effect for 2 years.
Okay, all right, so I misunderstood. Should our civilian, my wife works up on Fort Wayne, right? She's kind of a high way up there in those civilian ranks, and we would like to see her get a raise, please. Thank you.
Okay, I hope she gets a raise too. All right, Representative Sisna.
Yes, and in Alaska, we have a record of the most veterans in the country per capita, and we have the largest number of military people from the villages, the towns across Alaska. It's really amazing how many Alaskans have felt that responsibility. I think with the huge energy costs, all of those kinds of things that affect our military, the trouble getting health, that kind of thing, means no, we need to stop that kind of thing.
Okay, let's talk about education for a minute. Here's a question from someone in the audience that says, what is the role of Congress in ensuring that our children are well educated, from preschool to high school and in college or technical training? So what is the role of Congress promoting an education system? I'm not sure who went first last, but Representative Sisna, please.
Thank you. I'm one of these people. I'm not terribly emotional about school. I think it's job preparation. I think the most important thing in your life can be really getting a job that you love, and that means really good early preparation, good education all the way through, and I think it's getting people ready for work. And so to me, that is something that the federal government can do as a protection for our society so that we'll always be at work.
Mr. McDermott?
Can I have the question one more time again, please?
What is the role of Congress in ensuring that our children are well educated from preschool to high school and in college or technical training?
Okay, again, another one of my close topics I have a lot of interest in. I believe they have to have, anybody heard of Adam Smith? Right, the invisible hand concept? Adam Smith said, hey, listen, we keep government out of the private sector as much as possible. They're a referee at best. But he also said that government should have a responsibility to provide a good education for our citizens, because a well-educated group of people ends up to being a group of people that we could use in the workforce. I think that's kind of biased, but yes.
Okay, we've had many years of a robust economy. It has led to the situation we find ourselves in now, where the middle class is being squeezed out. So I guess the essence of this question is here at this point. How would you assure that the middle class and others can earn a living wage? Mr. McDermott.
All right, I'm excited about this question. How about we allow that harvesting of our natural resources around the world that we were talking about? Remember that thing, that pipeline from Canada running through the middle of the United States? How many jobs would have been there? How many middle class and people with welding and sheetrock and all these other types of technical skills and hard-working skills would have been put to employment? I just think there's so much opportunity out there right now, but so much regulation is holding us up from being the great nation that we've always been economically. Thank you.
Representative Sisson, how would you assure that the middle class and others can earn a living wage?
Well, and of course in Alaska, and I really come from Alaska on this, but we have the world's resources. We have more than renewable and non-renewable energy. We're there. We have huge amounts. I say keep it local. Try to be solving problems locally as much as you can so that people are able to keep their families together, get the good education, get the protections you need to stay at work. Keep building the local communities.
Thank you. The Law of the Sea Treaty has been under deliberation in Congress for quite some time, in the Senate. Well, it hasn't really been dealt with openly in the Senate, but it has been pending approval or disapproval. The question here is, and just as background for this, many people say the Law of the Sea Treaty, the supporters say it's necessary to have clear rules on the Arctic off the coast of Alaska. But the question from the audience is this: what would you do to get the Law of the Sea Treaty through Congress? Representative Sisson.
I think the Law of the Sea and Treaty and actually passing our say, the United States being a part of that is really critical. I think because Alaska has unique conditions in our state that we're the only Arctic state, that it's really important to be a strong voice on that. And I think we have to get caught up on that kind of law.
Mr. McDermott?
Again, from my background in the university, I talk to my students, we're in a global economy. If we keep putting all these restrictions on ourselves as far as development goes, as far as competing on the global stage, then we will find ourselves as a second-class economic strength in the world.
If you are elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, would you pledge to vote the party line? Well, no, let me say it differently. I pause a little time. Would you pledge to vote the party line on issues that affect the whole country? Explain. Mr. McDermott.
I get to go first. This is a great one for me because if you elect me to the United States Congress, I would be the first Libertarian ever to be in the United States Congress. And I'm not voting party line. All right? I can guarantee you that. And I never would have anyways, because our party is about personal liberty first, not party first. Thank you for the question.
Representative Sisson, please.
Well, I must admit, and it's a little bit like that, in the Democratic Party for 14 years, we just haven't had required votes. It never has been, and I wouldn't do it.
Now, as far as fiscal policy goes, what are your plans to increase efficiency in government? Let's start with Representative Sisson.
Efficiency, I think that we've got to be doing it right, and that means that we do the kind of oversight we must have. One of the really critical parts, and it keeps coming up in all of these questions, is that we're not really looking at our Constitution and upholding it with certainly civil rights, all of those kinds of things. We're not being careful enough. We need to be watching every single one of our agencies, making sure they're doing the job they're supposed to be, and positively make changes so they do.
Mr. McDermott, please.
I would remind the folks in Washington, D.C. that in business, we're risking our capital. In Washington, D.C., they're risking the people's capital. And they need to be that much more transparent, They need to be that much more efficient, and maybe they need a few more business-minded people to be there in Washington, D.C. to help them with that transition, because they need to make that transition. Thank you.
This is another question related to healthcare. What if people can't pay in to private medical accounts? And related to that, what if the fund tanked? Mr. McDermott, please.
Great question. How did I get that one first? But anyways, simple. I was talking earlier. I said choice. That's the magic word. I didn't say to eliminate one. I think we need to give Americans choice. And it's just that simple. There we go. They're all covered.
Well, the second question is, what if the fund tanks?
The federal government fund? Is that what we were referring to?
I think this means...
We are going in that direction. Yes, there's a good chance it may just do that and tank. And the only thing that's going to save it is to have more free enterprise, going back to the entrepreneurship, the intrapreneurship, getting America back on track again of producing wealth.
Representative Sisna?
I've been 27 years being self-employed, and I fortunately never needed help because I wasn't sick. I believe group plans are the only financially successful thing, and helping each other. And if all the citizens in the United States actually go under some kind of management plan that we all have some part in, that helps our country really be the successful country it can.
Well, Congress keeps pushing decisions down the road, such as sequestration. What will you do to help stop this practice? We'll start with you, Representative Sisna.
Oh man, sequestration. And I know sequestration, it's a really great word. I'm not remembering right now.
Well, I believe that sequestration is the enforced budget cuts that are going to take effect if Congress can't agree on budget cuts.
There you go.
I think that's right.
Well, and that's that deadlock. That's exactly what we keep on getting into, when in fact we're getting into politics, I think, in a way that we've got to kill politics to a certain degree, at least when we're really dealing with things like budgets, and we've got to get them done. We've got to do them well together.
Mr. McDermott, please.
Yeah, so just think about this. Washington, D.C. says, okay, if we get to the point that we can't do our jobs, what we'll do is we'll have this magic envelope that will be open, that we all agree on today, that will just tear us apart financially. We need to hold our representatives' feet to the fire and have them. This is just a shame of what these representatives are getting. Well, why are you letting them get away with this, folks?
Okay. About the energy front. What can you do to help get the same sweetheart deal on natural gas that South Central Alaska has been getting for 30 years? And that's a reference to the, huge difference in energy prices between Fairbanks and Anchorage. Mr. McDermott, please.
As someone who uses natural gas in his home, I can tell you right now, paying, 20 times what they're paying in the lower 48, 5 times what they're paying in Anchorage, just makes me green with envy or upset. What do we need to do? Well, it's funny because I was listening to the mayor of North Pole today talking on something very similar on this topic. What we need to do is get Anchorage to understand that Alaska was there for them, and now they need to be there for the interior.
Representative Sisna?
Well, one of the things I've been doing for the last 9 years is going to communities, really looking at well-being issues, and the cost of fuel is one of the real huge problems. And it makes no sense that we have areas that have sweetheart deals and areas that are paying, maybe in Anchorage it's $2 and it's $10 in another community. That doesn't make any sense. And I think that's something, as a state, that we have a requirement to get situations figured out, like resources like that, that we really are making a fair deal across all of the state.
Okay, Susan, maybe for this question, we'll maybe have go back to the longer answers for 2 minutes. So to both candidates. You are running against Don Young. Don Young has represented us in Washington, D.C. for many years. Question, if you win the election, where would you place your priorities? Or where Don Young left off? Where would you place your priorities? What issues would you like to tackle? Start with Representative Sisner.
My own emphasis is in those areas where we're not paying attention to making positive that people across the country are being treated with respect, that they're, and actually it's probably very similar to my fellow to the left, and that's, although he's to the right, isn't he? Oh, pardon me. But it really is that we're not really informing ourselves and working together in a way that makes sure that we're giving equality to all of our country. And I don't see how we're going to go forward without really getting much more conversation and putting politics aside. And that would be a change, is to really make sure that we're working with other states in partnerships as much as we possibly can, because so many other states have a great many similar views to ours, and we could get very far by working together and putting politics aside on the very, very important things, like constitutional issues.
Mr. McDermott, where would you place your priorities?
Sarbanes-Oxley Act had a huge impact on our small businesses across the country. In particular, if you look at the statistics over the last several years, the number of small businesses doing IPOs, initial public offerings, has gone down dramatically. Why? Because Sarbanes-Oxley has written them in with regulation, has written it to the point where if they do become a public company, which means, ladies and gentlemen, they're expanding their business, the amount of regulations and hoops and I's and T's that must be crossed and dotted are daunting. And it's slowing up the development of our economics. It's things like that. I think it's section 403 or 404, if you want to look it up precisely, somewhere in that neighborhood, because it's several thousand pages long. Something else out of DC that should be put on one page. So these are the things I'll be looking at immediately, is what's hindering our economic growth. And I can tell you right now, the number one thing hindering our economic growth is our United States government with their excessive regulations.
There's some discussion in Congress about changing the Social Security cost of living adjustment to better reflect what seniors spend, while others want to reduce the COLA to help cut the deficit. Which, if any, do you support? Mr. McDermott, let's start with you.
Yeah, well, when it comes to things like cost of living allowance, again, I'm going to use my own experience when I was in the Air Force. When we get a cost of living allowance, I have to tell you, me and my family, we did rely on that. And if it's something that's been promised, then we just can't pull the rug out. I mean, there has to be a weaning process, i.e., maybe in the future there could be some agreements going on on how we impact the Social Security system. But the one that's intact right now, the promises that have been made right now, it's going to be difficult without causing riots in the halls of Congress to just pull that away. So I would talk with my colleagues, see what kind of compromises we can come up with. I understand there are some that are staunch. Some of my friends on the right are staunch. They're not going to want to make a move in that direction. But again, if I can use how much time do I have in this one? 3 whole minutes? A minute and 11 seconds. Well, when Mom was here, Mom told me that, hey, Jim, I'm feeling guilty that I'm taking advantage. She felt like she was taking advantage of the system because she needed help. But it was things that she had earned throughout her lifetime. And before she passed away, I said, Mom, listen, this country was built on your back and the back of people just like you. I am not going to be the one to tell you you're not going to have a right to these benefits that have been promised you. So we have to honor our promises and our obligations. And then from there, we can start looking at the future. And we can start with the future by talking to many of our young professionals out there right now, getting their input. And let me tell you, I hear their input daily. And we take that input to Washington, D.C.
Representative Sisner.
Well, we are a state where the cost of living is different throughout the state. And for people who are living in some of the places where there's just no way that you can pay your fuel for the winter. I mean, it really is just astounding to talk to these communities and what they're facing. And I think that making that difference something that's more fair is reasonable. There are situations where I've heard where it isn't, a person really isn't being required to live in a more difficult situation and needing that extra money. So I think that it's important to really look at that and make sure the studies are done to make sure that we're really talking fair.
I see by the clock that it's time for our closing statements. And we give each of you 2 minutes to sort of wrap up here. We'll start with Mr. McDermott.
Again, AARP, moderator, my colleague, thank you. And all of you that came out tonight, thank you. As you know, we libertarians, we have a reputation for sometimes living on the wild side. Well, I don't know so much how wild I am. According to my kids, I'm pretty boring. But my wife says, but anyway, moving on. With that said, as I wrap up tonight, we need to start looking at what the personal choices are and looking at personal liberty and decisions that Alaskans are making, what they're asking. For example, Alaskans have said to me, again, I do work around daily with a younger group of folks, that, Mr. McDermott, I thought medical marijuana was legal. I said, it is in Alaska. You just can't sell it. Now, if we're going to go around and find a way to take things away that the people have voted in, I just have a little bit of a problem with that. How's the war on drugs been going? We spent $1 trillion on it so far. Are we doing well? The answer is no. We'll probably spend another $1 trillion. Could we use it maybe to help out with that COLA that we were just talking about? I believe we could. I think there's a lot of priority or decision-making that needs to be done with our priorities in this country. Now, I love Alaska. I love the Alaskan people. I would have no less fun than you would have with me in Washington, D.C. I would have a ball representing you. I would have no problem taking what you want me to do and bringing it up in the halls of D.C. I am not beholden to any party. I'm not beholden to any donations because I decided to take 0. Lobbyists, I'll show them the door. You can count on me, Alaskans, to be there for you if you so choose. Thank you.
I had a great time with what feels like my brother, because my brother's a libertarian as well, except for a lot more conservative. So, fortunately, there are so many of us with so many different views in Alaska, and we all still have a love for our state. And that love for our state is something that I think needs to be back in Washington, D.C., that we need to have the diversity that we have in this state really protected by the federal government, because we are the only Arctic state, and we're facing some terrific challenges ahead. We have enormous problems in terms of some of the behavioral choices that our people make, that we have problems getting our students graduated from high school and college. We're in worse shape than most of the country. We don't do well in terms of building small businesses. We don't do well in taking care of many of the different health kinds of conditions. We're great in some. We've been making some real strides, but we've got real problems. A lot of those are because of just how vast our state is and how difficult it is for people to get around, the costs of keeping your home warm, all of the different challenges Alaska has, at the same time that the world is planning our future, and not actually ours, but they're coming to our area, and they're ahead of us. They have more of the equipment to come in and develop our state than we have to protect ourselves. We've got to work together to strengthen all of our Alaskans. We need the federal government coming with us and strengthening us, but we need to guide them.
Thank you very much, Representative Cisna and Mr. McDermott. We appreciate your participation tonight. We'd also like to thank the audience and thank the volunteers from the League of Women Voters who helped shepherd people through these things. The AARP says that the AARP encourages you to vote for the candidate of your choice, but exercise your right to vote. And this very important announcement I was just handed. Please help yourself to a cookie on the way out. I think you can vote with that way. Anyway, I want to thank both of our candidates here tonight. And this discussion has been good. Thank you.